Stories Philippines podcast.
A chill can slither across your skin when you least expect it, arriving without invitation and settling like a cold, damp hand on your neck. Sometimes this sensation begins as a whisper in the back of your mind, a barely audible murmur that you try to ignore, a flicker of unease as you step from a brightly lit lobby into a long, silent hallway whose lights seem dimmer the farther you walk. The air grows heavy and tastes of stale perfume and old dust, thick with the echo of footsteps that are not your own but that match the rhythm of your heartbeat. You reach for the room key, hand trembling just a little despite your efforts to appear composed, and wonder, what if the face at the end of the corridor is not a guest? Not a staff member, not even someone among the living? What if the walls themselves remember and hunger and wait, keeping secrets behind their paint and plaster? There is something profoundly primal about the fear of being alone in a strange place, an instinct older than language that whispers caution into your ears, the knowledge that at any moment, the ordinary can twist into the terrifying haunts every tentative step. A squeak of a floorboard becoming the cry of something unseen. The hum of the air conditioning turning into a low, persistent breathing from within the walls. The safe haven of a hotel room. A soft bed, a bedside lamp, a locked door can suddenly feel like fragile paper, a fragile circle of light that separates you from an encroaching dark. It can feel less like shelter and more like a trap for the soul, an elegant cage where memories and malevolence linger under the faded wallpaper. Tonight, we step into that haunted heart of the Filipino rest house and hotel, a place where the ordinary comforts of hospitality are devoured by shadows, where the polite smile of the receptionist masks stories of vanished guests, and where whispers behind closed doors suggest that some occupants check in, but never check out. If you continue listening, be warned. The stories in this episode linger in the dark. They touch on loss, pain, and the unknown. Some may find what follows deeply disturbing. This episode is best experienced with caution and a mind prepared for the uncanny. I am Jessica, and you are listening to Stories Philippines podcast. This is Season 5, Episode 11, aired on March 14th, 2006. The House That Feeds on Guests, the Haunted Hotel and Rest House. Before we journey further, remember to send your personal stories to our email at stories-phpodcast@gmail.com. The show notes and detailed ways to support this program can be found in the episode description. For those who crave extra chills, extended interviews, and deeper dives into the lore, exclusive content is waiting for you on Patreon. And for your daily dose of Filipino folklore, follow us on social media for updates, archival photos, and community discussions. Our story tonight begins in a place that seems at first unremarkable. A modest rest house perched on a rocky hill in Rizal, commonly used for weekend retreats, family gatherings, and company seminars. It is the kind of place that promises a brief escape from city noise, the chance to breathe pine-scented air, and to swap hurried lives for slow afternoons on a veranda. Yet beneath that ordinary surface, for every guest, there is an undercurrent of unease. Doors rattle in the windless hours as if pushed by invisible hands. The windows fog over overnight with handprints no cleaner can erase. And sometimes, in the dead of night, a voice calls your name from an empty hallway, a summons that turns laughter into white-knuckled silence. The Filipino haunted hotel is a living legend, a recurring trope in local travel lore and ghost story circles. In every city and province, from the crowded heart of Manila to the cool, misty slopes of Baguio, stories flourish about rooms that lock themselves, housekeeping staff who appear and disappear without warning, and entities that mimic the living with a precision that chills the marrow. It is more than idle imagination. It is a fear woven into the national fabric, a cautionary tale and an explanation for the unexplainable, passed down in hushed tones by travelers, overnight staff, and laborers alike. Consider the Diplomat Hotel in Baguio City. Once a serene retreat and seminary for Dominican friars, the building's history darkened during the Second World War, when it became a site of unspeakable violence. Nuns and priests were executed. Some reports speak of beheadings by occupying forces, and many lives were cruelly extinguished on that property. Guests and local storytellers now speak of headless figures gliding through ruined corridors, of the distant sound of weeping children echoing from a shattered fountain where many young lives were said to have ended. After the war, the estate passed through different hands, and at one time operated as a hotel run by a spiritual healer whose own death marked another turning point in its troubled timeline. But the dead seemed to refuse repose. Neighbors and visitors still report the clatter of dishes in empty dining rooms, the recurring slamming of doors that have no clear cause, and the anguished screams of souls that seem trapped in an endless loop of suffering. Even now, the Diplomat stands as a grim monument to horror and history, a place where memory and tragedy seep from every crumbling wall, and where the past feels impossibly present. Not far from Baguio, Teachers Camp is another destination with a dark reputation. Established during the American era as a training center for teachers, it is now famous for its ghostly residents and the hushed stories passed between visitors. Guests speak of a spectral woman in white who weeps through the night, a headless priest wandering beneath ancient trees, and rooms where a sudden, chilling drop in temperature is the only warning before a shadow passes through the bed. The stories are told with the same solemn cadence each season. The lamplight flickers, the hairs on the arm rise, and then a silence falls that is almost a presence. The accounts are so persistent that even the most skeptical have learned to knock gently on the door before entering a room, as if to offer respect or inquire permission from whatever might be on the other side. In Manila, the Grand Luneta Hotel remains a centerpiece of the city, a masterpiece of French Renaissance architecture with its carved cornices and high ceilings. But behind that ornate facade, workers and guests have whispered of inexplicable cold spots on the 6th floor, of lights and air conditioners turning on and off by themselves, and of a woman who appears at the window, gazing out at the city she can never leave. Her appearance is described in the same tones of quiet sorrow, a figure whose presence seems older than the structure itself. Even after a blessing ceremony was performed during restoration, the legends endured, proof to many that some presences refuse to be banished by prayer alone, and that rituals, however heartfelt, cannot always erase what is woven into a place. It is not only the famous hotels that claim such stories. Throughout the Philippines, ordinary rest houses, places used for company outings, spiritual retreats, family reunions, or simple weekend escapes, have become the settings for the extraordinary. In Rizal, for example, a group of college students attending a leadership seminar at a secluded rest house found themselves locked in their rooms by an unseen force. The door handles would not turn no matter how they tugged, and pressing their faces to the cool glass, they saw their own reflections twist into unfamiliar smiles that did not belong to them. They whispered and prayed together through the night, and in the morning, the doors opened as easily as if nothing had happened. Still, the students left with a persistent sense that something in the house had measured them, weighed their intentions, and chosen, for reasons unknown, to let them go. This fear of being trapped is a common thread in Filipino ghost stories, recurring in tales from small towns to big cities. Part of it comes from the nation's tangled history, a long legacy of colonization, war, displacement, and survival. In this reading, the haunted hotel becomes a metaphor for places where suffering lingers, where trauma is never fully exorcised. The doors that refuse to open, the rooms that drain the will to leave, speak to a deeper cultural anxiety, that the past can reach out and claim the living at any moment, collapsing time so that yesterday and today press against each other like breath on glass. There are those who insist these stories are just echoes of grief, fatigue, and superstition. The mind, skeptics suggest, plays tricks when it is tired, stressed, or unnerved by the unfamiliar. The disruption of routine and the vulnerability of sleeping in strange places can produce vivid dreams and waking hallucinations. Nervous laughter can harden into conviction. Yet the consistency of the tales, the mimicry of voices, the mechanical traps, the chilling sense of being watched, suggests something more complicated than simple suggestion. In Filipino folklore, the soul is easily lost. A person who sleeps in a strange place without protection risks being naagaw ng diwa, their spirit snatched by a wandering entity that moves like a rumor. To guard against this, elders still teach the young to observe small, exacting rituals, to turn their slippers upside down before bed, to pray or mutter protective verses before closing their eyes, and never to answer if a voice calls out from the darkness. These practices are pragmatic prayers against the unknown, handed down as both superstition and survival. But sometimes, even these precautions fail. One listener shared a chilling episode from a resort in Boracay. It was her first time traveling with friends. They checked in, dropped their bags, and went out to enjoy the beach, laughing and taking photos until dusk. That night, as she returned alone to her room after an evening walk, she found a hotel staff member waiting at her door, smiling politely as if he had been expecting her. He offered to help carry her things, and his manner and uniform put her at ease. But when she turned for just a moment to retrieve a key from her bag, he was gone. No footsteps, no sound, nothing to suggest he had left the corridor. The next morning, unsettled, she asked at the front desk about the man in the blue uniform. The manager's face went pale. There was no one by that description working at the hotel, and the uniform she described matched one retired long ago after a staff member died in a tragic accident years before. Another unsettling account comes from Cebu. A young woman named Queen worked as a housekeeper in a well-known city hotel. She learned quickly that certain rooms were avoided by the staff, especially late at night, and that odd rules governed their routines. Once, she was sent to clean a room immediately after a guest checked out. As she entered the dim corridor and unlocked the door, she heard the shower running inside. She announced herself, waited a respectful moment, then stepped into the bathroom expecting to find a forgetful guest. The bathroom was empty, the shower off, but the mirror was fogged over with the words, "Do not leave," written clearly in the steam. When she reported the incident, her supervisor only nodded grimly, made a curt notation, and marked the room as under maintenance. The experienced staff had their own survival rituals, never working alone in certain wings, never speaking the names of the dead aloud, and always leaving a small offering of salt at the threshold before beginning work. These accounts echo across the archipelago, from the old Casa Vallejo in Baguio, where guests report unexplained noises, cold spots, and the persistent sensation of being watched by unseen eyes, to the abandoned Cresta del Mar resort in La Union, where daring travelers glimpse headless figures moving with eerie purpose through moonlit ruins. Each story is a thread in a broader tapestry of fear. These tales serve as a reminder that, in many corners of the Philippines, the boundary between the living and the dead is considered thin, and by some accounts, easily crossed under the wrong conditions. Why do these entities mimic the living so convincingly? Explanations vary. Some say it is the work of a doppelganger, a restless spirit that takes the form of a trusted friend or colleague to lure the unwary into danger. Others believe such mimicry is a desperate attempt by the dead to seek closure, using familiar faces and tones to ask for prayers, forgiveness, or help finishing unfinished business. In many accounts, however, the mimic is plainly malevolent, assuming the guise of hotel staff to invite guests into rooms that should remain locked, to lead them down staircases that vanish into nothingness, or to coax them into following where light cannot reach. Regardless of motive, these stories persist, passed along by employees and travelers alike, shaping the rituals and warnings that staff share in hushed tones with newcomers. There are stories, too, of rooms that ensnare the soul. In a rest house in Laguna, a corporate team on a weekend retreat found themselves plagued by nightmares. Every one of them dreamed of waking up, stepping out into the hallway and finding the door to their room gone. When they tried to call for help, their voices made no sound. The next morning, they discovered that every member of the group had the same dream. A local caretaker told them this was not unusual. The house had once been a hospital during the war, and souls lost to violence were known to wander, seeking bodies to inhabit. The international parallels are striking. In Japan, the legend of the honeymoon hotel tells of rooms that trap guests in endless loops of time, where the only escape is to confront the sorrow of the spirits within. In the United States, tales of haunted lodges in the mountains speak to the same fear of isolation, of being claimed by a place that remembers more than it should. Yet, the Filipino experience is unique. Here, the hotel is not merely a setting for horror. It is a reflection of the nation's collective memory. Places like the Hyatt Terraces Hotel in Baguio, destroyed in the 1990 Luzon earthquake, are haunted by more than ghosts. They are haunted by the legacy of tragedy, by the knowledge that safety is always an illusion. Modern investigations have tried to explain these phenomena. Paranormal researchers use tools to measure temperature drops, electromagnetic fields, and electronic voice phenomena, disembodied voices captured on tape. Some claim to have found evidence of the supernatural, but just as often, the results are inconclusive. What remains is the testimony of countless guests and workers, united by a conviction that something walks the hallways at night. For many Filipinos, the presence of spirits is both a curse and a call to prayer. Priests are invited to bless haunted rooms, sprinkling holy water and reciting prayers to banish the restless dead. But sometimes, the rites only make things worse. One well-known retreat house in Rizal was abandoned after a series of failed exorcisms. The owner, a devout Catholic, left a crucifix at every window, but found them all turned upside down by morning. The battle, it seems, is not always won with faith alone. The terror of the haunted hotel is not just in the apparitions, but in the sense of vulnerability. To travel is to surrender control, to trust that strangers will keep you safe. When that trust is broken, when the walls themselves seem to conspire against you, the fear becomes almost unbearable. There are stories of survival, too. One listener, Raymond, recalls a childhood trip to a rest house in Tagaytay. Late at night, he awoke to find the room freezing cold. A woman in a maid's uniform stood at the foot of his bed, her face hidden by long, tangled hair. She whispered his name, and he felt himself slipping into sleep. He fought to wake up, and when he finally did, the room was empty. But the slippers he had left by the door were turned upside down, just as his grandmother had taught him. To this day, Raymond never travels without a small bottle of salt in his bag. Others are not so lucky. There are tales of guests who checked in and were never seen again. Their luggage remains untouched, while the staff quietly moves their names to a different ledger, the book of those who belong to the house now. What drives these hauntings? Is it the violence of the past echoing through time? Is it the grief of the dead longing for release? Or is it something darker, a hunger, a need to possess, to feed on the fear and loneliness of those who pass through? The very notion that a place can be sentient, that a building can absorb the suffering of those inside and use it to draw in new victims, is a profound source of horror that transcends mere spook stories. It suggests that architectural forms are not passive structures, but active participants in the human drama, silent observers who eventually develop an appetite. This ties into ancient beliefs found worldwide, where man-made places like castles and temples were seen as having their own distinct spirits, capable of either protection or profound malice. Consider the history of construction in the Philippines. Many of the older buildings that host these legends, the Spanish-era churches converted into temporary hospitals during wartime, the large homes of the wealthy, were built on what locals often believed were already sacred or dangerous grounds. They were often constructed quickly, and sometimes without the traditional appeasement rituals for the earth spirits, the anitos or diwata, whose domain was being disturbed. If a hotel stands on a plot where a battle was fought, or where a sudden violent death occurred, the structure itself is seen as a scar on the land, and the ghosts are not just haunting the building, they are guarding the disturbed earth beneath it. This deep connection between place, history, and the supernatural imbues the haunted hotel with a far more significant, inescapable dread than a simple, generic ghost story. The entity is often territorial, a guardian of a painful secret. The fear of mimicry in these hotels speaks to a fundamental distrust of the familiar. In a foreign environment, the hotel staff and other guests are the only sources of security. When the supposed housekeeper with the tangled hair whispers your name, or the security guard with the outdated uniform points you toward a locked basement, the trap is effective precisely because it uses the face of comfort. This particular type of deception, where a malevolent spirit takes on a trusted human form, has a cultural resonance with Filipino legends of the kapre or the sirena, who lure victims by changing their shapes. The doppelganger in a hotel setting is a modernized, domesticated version of these wilderness shapeshifters, bringing the ancient danger directly into the manufactured security of a tourist room. What if the mimicry is not meant to harm, but to keep the dead company? Imagine the unending solitude of being tethered to a single hotel room for 100 years, watching thousands of living souls pass through your world without ever truly seeing you. Perhaps the ghostly figure of the chambermaid is less a predator and more an echo, a desperate attempt to engage, to be seen, to break the silence. When the spirit writes, "Do not leave" on the steamed mirror, is it a threat or a plea from a lonely soul who remembers the fleeting warmth of a human presence? This is the unsettling ambiguity that defines the best Filipino horror. The line between the victim and the villain is always blurred, and sometimes the greatest terror is the sheer, bottomless grief of the trapped dead. The very architecture of these places seems to encourage this sense of being watched. The long, repeating hallways, the uniform doors, the echoing silence of the off-season. It is a psychological landscape perfectly suited for unsettling the human mind. The sameness makes it easy to lose your way, to mistake one door for another, one face for a ghost. And when the ghost appears, it is often in the periphery, a flash of white in the mirror, a dark shape at the end of the hall. Never quite solid, never fully confirmable. The uncertainty is the engine of the fear. The mind fills the gaps, and what the mind creates is almost always worse than what is actually there. The consistency of the stories across the archipelago, however, pushes back against the purely psychological explanation. Too many people, in too many different geographically isolated locations, report the same phenomena. The sensation of a cold weight on the chest, the smell of burnt sugar or old blood, the sound of weeping coming from an impossible source. These collective experiences suggest a shared reservoir of paranormal activity, a national vulnerability to the unseen that links the old colonial hotels to the modern concrete rest houses. The history of the nation, one of constant occupation, trauma, and upheaval, seems to have charged the very soil with a restless energy that these structures simply channel. Every year, new accounts are added to the old. A guest sees a face in the window that matches no one on the staff. A housekeeper finds a trail of wet footprints leading from a locked bathroom to an empty bed. A security guard hears laughter in a room that was supposed to be empty. Even in the age of smartphones and CCTV, the haunted hotel endures. The stories are shared on social media, whispered at company outings, and recounted in late-night gatherings by those who swear they have seen the impossible. If you have a story of your own, perhaps an encounter in a rest house, a brush with something that should not be, share it with us at storiestomphpodcast@gmail.com. Your experience might help someone else survive their night in the house that feeds on guests. As we draw this episode to a close, remember, the places we visit are never as empty as they seem. The walls watch. The shadows wait. Sometimes the greatest danger is not what follows you from the outside, but what is already waiting for you inside. Find show notes and support options in the description. For those who want more, exclusive content is always waiting on Patreon. And every day, we share more folklore and true stories on our social media pages. Tonight, as you lock your door and turn out the lights, ask yourself, when you are most vulnerable, who is watching from the other side? What if the face you trust is only a mask, and the room you call your own is hungry for more than rest? Remember the words of an old traveler. The road is full of ghosts, but only the empty house can devour you. Listen to more past and future episodes for journeys into the dark and the unknown. Do not forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share this podcast. Support us in any way you can by checking out the show notes. Thank you for joining me tonight. Be careful where you rest your head. Good night, and keep your soul safe.